Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here today with all of Herholdt's trusted installers. And Herholdt, thank you so much for arranging this launch webinar. I'm going to present some slides in a second, and together with some other members of our team, we're going to be taking you through this exciting product launch of Solarbot and how together with Herholdt, we're going to help to improve the performance of solar systems throughout South Africa. Before I get the slides up, I just want to double check that I'm coming through clearly. Does someone mind just raising a hand or raising their voice to let me know if everything's coming through?
Loud and clear on my side. Thanks, John.
Yeah, excellent. Great.
All good.
Excellent. The slides are coming now. Give me one sec. Great. Are the slides showing on the screen for everyone?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. Thank you, Jason. Cool. Then once again, welcome to this webinar to launch this partnership between Plentify and Herholdt and ultimately have impact on South African households. Over the course of the next couple of hours, we're going to take you through several topics. We're going to start with an overview of the product itself, which I will be delivering. I'm then going to hand over to my colleague Annelie, who's going to take you through the installer journey. We'll have time for questions and answers. And then finally, assuming that you are all very excited about the product at the end of this, there'll be a call to action to get you registered and set up to start deploying. Before I dive into the details of the product overview, maybe just a quick introduction as to who I am. I'm John Cornick. I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders of Plentify. I also lead our product team, which is one of the reasons why I'm here doing this today. We're really excited to tell you about what we've built. And ultimately, what Plentify is an intelligent home energy management system. What that means is that there's an application that our end users get, there's a dashboard that our installers get, and there's a bunch of hardware devices that are controlled by those two applications. All of these pieces of the system work together to maximize solar self-consumption or to help people get the most out of their solar systems. As I mentioned, the kind of founding technology underpinning all of this are the hardware devices that get installed into people's homes. And there's two hardware devices that we have available at the moment. There's Hotbot, which attaches to your geyser, and Solarbot, which attaches to your inverter. These things obviously control those appliances, but part of the magic in what they deliver is also how they talk wirelessly to each other and help to optimize energy within the home, which we'll describe more in a second. Before we get into that, though, just a brief overview as to why homeowners are adopting Plentify and why installers are choosing to install Plentify as well. So firstly, on the homeowner side, there's three key things that homeowners really love about the Plentify platform. The first is control. You can monitor and control your solar system, your geyser, and your other connected appliances directly from the Plentify web application. Secondly, savings. The system makes better use of your battery, enabling it to be charged more with solar and less with grid, and also helps your appliances like your geyser to run much more efficiently. To put numbers against that, on average, our users are saving about 30% of their water heating costs, averaging about 350 Rand a month just on the geyser side. And we'll show you some case studies as to the significant impact that Solarbot can have on top of that as well. Finally, there's intelligence. The system isn't just there to monitor what is happening, but also to make intelligent decisions and give you insights in how to continue to improve your system. And we'll show you some really great case studies of that as well in a second. Why installers choose Plentify is firstly for competitive advantage. By incorporating our products into a solar solution, you can deliver a smarter, more optimized solution that ultimately performs better for your customers. Secondly, customer satisfaction. Through our system, installers can be alerted proactively to issues that have come up with systems and use that to provide proactive support to their customers and hopefully driving future business. And finally, in the flip side of the intelligence in identifying ways to improve your system is that this is a path for upgrades potentially from installers to sell onto their customers by taking this data-driven advice and helping customers incrementally improve their systems over time. So that's a lot of words. Let me show you some more pictures. and go into the details of the product. So let's start with the printed by product being every home's energy sidekick. The first part of this is the Plentify app. This is a web application available at my.plentify.io. It's a very easy to use app that essentially allows you to do 4 key things. You can control and monitor all your Plentify bots with ease. You can optimize your battery for more solar. You can direct any extra solar which exists directly to your geyser to avoid that from being wasted. And you can get more from your system with real-time insights and advice on how to continue improving the system. To go into that a little bit more detail, because as installers, you'll probably be engaging quite heavily with the customers in their homes, helping them to get onboarded onto the system. Obviously, it's intuitive and they should be able to walk through it themselves, but so that you have insight into what it is you're going to be leaving behind. The first step is for users to onboard onto the app or to register on the app. You simply head to my.plentify.io, you click register, you enter your unique Plentify IDs, which I think Annalie is going to tell you more about, but each device has a unique 4-character ID that gets input into the app. And then they go through a process of customizing the system for their needs. For example, saying when they want hot water or what their energy preferences are. It's really important that users onboard on this app. It's through this app that we understand their preferences and ultimately able to deliver highly valuable services. If they don't register on the app, the system is going to be basically guessing what they want and doing so in a conservative manner to ensure that they always have hot water and they always have energy supply. But by taking that conservative approach, we will be leaving value on the table. So really important to encourage your customers to register on the app. Once you get inside the app, one of the really cool things about Plentify is the automations that we offer. So you can see here some screenshots of some of the automations, both energy automations and hot water automations. On the energy automation side, I think here you'll start to see the difference in how Plentify operates to other home energy management systems. You know, if you, for example, working with the typical SunSync dongle on the SunSync platform, you know, the type of optimizations that you're going to be doing are, you know, what is the minimum state of charge for the battery? And actually, let's use an example here of what could have happened. You know, you might have gone and installed a solar system at one of your clients' houses last year in 2023. When you were busy configuring the system for them, you asked them, why did you get the solar system? They likely told you because they never want to experience load shedding again. And so you might have chosen to set that minimum state of charge of the battery pretty high, 70, 80%, to ensure that even if there was load shedding in the morning, they would have sufficient supply to see them through the day. Obviously, the downside of that is by starting the day on 70 to 80% battery state of charge, you only have 20 to 30% headroom available in the battery to store solar. And once that battery is at capacity, the solar has nowhere to go other than the demand in your home, should that exist. With Plentify, it's different. Plentify, you tell us the outcome that you want from the energy system, and the intelligence figures out how effectively to deliver that outcome to you. So for example, on the energy automation side, there's 2 primary outcomes that we present to users. The first outcome is, hey, do you always want to be protected from load shedding? And then the system will always monitor your load shedding schedules and ensure that your battery state of charge is sufficient to see you through load shedding at whatever time of day that happens to be. Or perhaps you're more conservative than that, or you live in a municipality with a less reliable grid, in which case you want protection not just from load shedding, but also from unplanned outages. In this case, you would choose the extended option, and the system would automatically monitor your demand throughout the day and adjust the battery state of charge to ensure that you're protected even for unplanned outages. Similarly, on the hot water side, there's a bunch of powerful optimizations that we offer there. And again, it works very differently to how devices are managed in the market at the moment. So I'm sure that if you're familiar with geyser timers, you'll be aware that, for example, if you wanted hot water at 7 a.m. in the morning, you would have to set your timer to heat probably between 5 and 7 to ensure that hot water was ready at 7. In fact, in many of our customers, before they adopted Plentify, they would tell us stories about how they would set an alarm for 3 in the morning to go manually turn their distribution board on so that they have hot water available. Obviously, with the solar system, it's even more complicated than that because not only do you want to drive efficiency in this way, but you also want to take advantage of solar power when it's available. So with Plentify, instead of saying, hey, I want my geyser to turn on between 5 and 7, you just say, I want to have hot water at 7 a.m. And the system figures out the most effective way to deliver you hot water at that time, to maximize your efficiency, but also to shift heating to times where clean energy is available that otherwise would have been wasted. And there's a bunch of other cool things in there as well, like you can prevent your geyser from heating during load shedding. You can set up your geyser to preheat in advance of load shedding, and a bunch of other power that you'll experience as you explore this app more deeply. Once you've set up these automations, it's now time to perform. And what better way to monitor your performance than with a bunch of insights? And there's a number of insights that are presented in the Plentify app, which we are continually building upon. So there's 3 main insights at the moment that you can pull between. The first is to monitor your solar self-consumption. So you can see, for example, in the screenshot here, this particular user, spoiler alert, it's me. Yesterday, we ran our house 90% on solar and 10% on grid. And next, you can understand the energy flows. So you can see that chart over there. You can see the solar generation nicely peaking in the middle of the day, as you would expect. And in order to achieve that, you can see that on the right-hand side, we had a whole bunch of load in the home during the day and a bunch of battery charging to absorb that solar when it was available. You'll notice the second peak over here in energy demand in the home, the second purple hump. That's when the battery was fully charged. We turned on the geyser to take advantage of all that extra solar. If that demand spike had not happened there, solar simply would have been curtailed, the solar generation would have dropped, and in our home, our solar self-consumption would have been a whole lot less than the 90% that we achieved. And then finally, you can assess your solar generation versus potential. And this is one of the cool models that we've built, is that we can take your coordinates, we can take data from your energy system, and with those 2 things, we can combine it with weather forecasts to predict exactly how much your solar system should be generating if it was being utilized 100%. And then we compare that to how much you actually generated. And so we can tell you, for example, hey, your solar panels only generated 50% of what they were actually capable of generating on that day. And that kind of leads to a whole bunch of insights that we deliver to help you to increase that share. The good news is that all of your customers will be getting access to all of this goodness from day one. When they buy a Hotbot or a Solarbot, it includes 12 months of premium Plentify services. This includes all of these optimizations, all of this intelligent advice, all of these real-time controls, so real-time data, and obviously convenient control from anywhere through our web app. After this initial 12-month period, customers will have the option of either continuing to subscribe for the premium package or reverting to the free version, which will still give them all of the monitoring which they desire and which they would get from other applications as well. In order to fuel all of these applications and all of these automations, obviously the bots, the hardware behind it, is critically important as well. And so I'll take you through the bots in a little bit more detail. Starting with Solarbot. So Solarbot is a small Internet of Things device that connects to your inverter. It connects into the communications port, the same one used by the dongle, like the RS485 port, for example. And it exists to help maximize your solar self-consumption. One of the great things about Solarbot is it's completely plug and play. You literally just plug a cable into the inverter port of Solarbot and the other side into the comms port of the inverter. And it really is the key to getting the most out of your investment. I want to highlight a couple of other features here. So obviously you can plug your inverter in, but we also have something called our pass-through. So if you, for example, want to use your SunSync dongle or your SolarMan dongle or your Solar Assistant dongle in combination with Plentify, you could do that. You simply plug that dongle into the pass-through port of Solarbot, and both systems will run in parallel. You'll also see that we have a battery port on there on the Solarbot. That's still in R&D, but expect some really cool insights coming from your batteries directly through there as well. We have something called Plumbus, which is a wired expandable port with which we're going to be introducing a bunch of really cool peripherals for Solarbot to help improve the performance of systems further. There's also a power supply. However, when installing this on a SunSync or DEA inverter, that's not required. It takes power directly from the inverter over the RS485. And finally, there's a couple of ports for external antennae, both for the Wi-Fi and for the RF, the 868 megahertz that we use to communicate between devices. So how does Solarbot work? It effectively is doing two things to maximize solar self-consumption. The first is optimizing your battery, and the second is connecting your appliances to solar. So it optimizes your battery, as I described earlier, by really understanding what the weather forecasts are going to be, understanding what your demand is going to be, understanding what the outage schedule is going to be, and developing effectively a real-time, tailored, personalized battery state of charge algorithm that continuously adapts your battery state of charge to leave as much headroom in your battery to store solar as possible, while making sure that the customer is still protected from outages in the way that they've specified. That only gets you so far, because as we've seen, even if you start your battery at 20% at the start of the day, it can be fully charged by solar by 11, 12, depending on the number of panels that you've got. And that's when Solarbot starts talking wirelessly to the appliances in your home, telling them to turn on. For example, talking wirelessly to Hotbot, saying, hey, we've got excess solar, and telling the geyser to turn on. Or, hey, there's an unexpected outage, and turning the geyser to turn off. One of the very cool things about the way that Solarbot does this is it is a rapid signal that is implemented fast enough to prevent tripping. So you can put your geyser onto the essential circuit, and with Solarbot, it can do that load control in real time to prevent circuit overload. The next bot to introduce you to is Hotbot, which is an intelligent controller that trains your geyser to use less energy. And it gives homeowners hot water when they want it and saves them money when they don't. I've already told you a bunch about how Hotbot works, how it efficiently heats your water intelligently, and does this by really understanding when you want hot water and tailoring your heating schedule around that. It also does targeted energy shifting. For example, by talking to Solarbot, it understands when there is extra solar available and turns on to take advantage of that effectively free energy. And it offers a whole bunch of other services. For example, best-in-class leak detection, where it can detect if any leak occurs in your geyser, send an alert, or close a shut-off valve to prevent that leak from damaging your home. It's best in class because it has the best leak coverage of any product in the market. Other products will take a single point leak estimate. So they'll have a single sensor at a single point in the drip tray. And if water doesn't happen to hit that single point, you will not detect the leak. Plentify's solution is about a meter long sensor, where if a single drop of water touches anywhere along this meter long sensor, it'll recognize the leak. And so it provides much more reliable and greater coverage than other products in the market for leaks. But of course, the real power comes in how these two products work together. We like to call them our power duo. And really, it's the wireless communication between Solarbot and Hotbot, and the way that they can coordinate in tandem with your solar system to make best use of a solar capacity and protect your home from overloads or outages at the same time. So let's go into some case studies, make this a little bit less theoretical, and show you some of the very real results that we've achieved over trialing this in many homes for the last several months. So the first case study comes from a customer by the name of Leanne, and she moved from a state of not being able to use all of her solar to not having enough solar. So what the state of Leanne's energy situation was when we entered her home was that she was spending about 2,500 to 4,500 Rand per month on electricity. This is after she'd already installed a solar system with 5.5 kilowatt peaks of solar, an 8 kilowatt DEA inverter, and 10 kilowatt hours of battery. And we introduced Solarbot and Hotbot. I'll give you the spoiler before I show you how. This is Leanne's quote. She says, "Since installing Solarbot, my electricity bill has decreased by an average of 2,000 Rand per month." That might sound a bit too good to be true, so let me show you exactly how we managed to achieve that. What these two charts are showing are the impact of Solarbot. On the left-hand side, you've got a before chart, on the right-hand side, an after chart. You see two lines on each of these charts. The orange chart is the amount of solar potential, the available solar. I mentioned earlier that one of the cool things about Plentify's tech is that we can take your coordinates, we can take historical data about your solar system, and we can use that to accurately forecast how much your solar panels should be generating if there was demand to use all of that solar. And so you can see before they had this nice parabolic available solar curve, but the actual solar usage in blue was much lower. In fact, they were only using about 69% of their solar potential. What we did is with Solarbot, we helped to better manage their battery state of charge, and with Hotbot, turn on their geyser to take advantage of extra solar and manage to get their solar utilization up to 98%. What's interesting is when you look at some of the other charts, the battery state of charge chart before and after, and the grid usage chart, you see a couple of observations. Firstly, afterwards, you can see, well, let's actually start before. You can see before they were charging their battery to full every day, but they were starting it in the morning at an 80% state of charge. Now it's starting at between 30 and 40%, but it actually never fully charges. At the same time, if you look at the grid usage has come down significantly, but even afterwards, there remains some grid usage in the mornings and the evenings. What these things tell us together is that, it's great, we've managed to increase Leanne's solar consumption by 2,000 Rand, but there's actually a lot further that we can go. The system is optimized as far as possible because we're fully utilizing their solar panels, but we can further improve the performance of their system by installing more solar panels. That'll make use of that additional battery capacity, which is currently sitting latent, and it will help to remove some of their grid usage, which still exists. And so this is an example of a recommendation that we could give to installers to then take this data and go and consult with your customers to help them improve their systems. The next example is from Paul, and Paul's is a situation where he maxed out his battery capacity. We maxed out his battery capacity, and there was still some solar unused, and so the recommendations here will be slightly different. Paul was spending 1,500 Rand per month on electricity, even with his solar system. He has 6.2 kilowatt peak of solar, an 8 kilowatt SunSync converter, and a 10 kilowatt hour battery. We introduced Solarbot and Hotbot. And the spoiler here is Paul says that after installing Solarbot, I'm saving about 450 Rand a month on my electricity bills. Solarbot sends extra solar power to my geyser, which is managed by Hotbot, so I have hot water all day. This means I need less heating in the morning and evening, which definitely saves me money. So another great experience from Paul. And one thing that you might notice here is the vast difference in savings between Paul's 450 Rand and Leanne's 2,000 Rand. And I think this speaks to the fact that no two systems are equal. It's a function of the infrastructure that's on site and how that homeowner is using that infrastructure. What Solarbot and Hotbot do is they will optimize that infrastructure as far as possible, but there's obviously a hard limit to how far that can go, and then it'll give you advice to improving it further. So clearly in this situation, Paul was doing a slightly better job in the baseline at optimizing his solar system itself, or the installer that Paul engaged did a better job of right-sizing the system for him than Leanne's installer, which I'm guessing is probably the story that we'll see with the group on this call. So let's show you how we managed to achieve this for Paul. Again, you see these two charts of the before and after, and you'll see that we managed to increase their solar utilization from 56% before to 83% after. Not to the 98 or 100% that we managed to achieve for Leanne. And you can see in this after chart that everything is going swimmingly for the first half of the day, solar is being fully utilized, and then it drops off a cliff. And surprisingly, well, not surprisingly, when you look at the battery state of charge chart, you can see exactly why that happens. The battery before was reaching full very, very early in the day because it was starting at 80%. Now it's starting much lower on this particular day, but it's still getting fully charged by the early afternoon. And therefore, because there's insufficient demand in the home, the solar gets curtailed and we're not fully utilizing its potential. And so the recommendations for Paul are slightly different. It's great, you're saving 450 Rand per month, but you can also do a lot better. The system is optimized as far as possible, but it turns out that your battery capacity is insufficient. There's nowhere for, sorry, not the battery capacity is insufficient. The solar capacity is, the battery capacity is insufficient, correct. The battery capacity is insufficient. So you could improve performance by adding hotbots to use all that solar that's not being used, adding other load controls, or adding more battery capacity. Again, recommendations that we'd give to the installer to pass on to the end user. Just a couple more quotes because there's really is a diverse set of benefits that you can get from Plentify's products. Mike, for example, actually I'll tell you Mike's story rather than just reading his quote. Mike lives in Cape Town, and they just moved into a new place, and they realized in the middle of Cape Town winter that they underestimated how cold the new place got, and they're like, okay, cool. They've been wood burning fireplace people their whole lives. They had a bit of money set aside. They were going to go install a wood burning fireplace. So they reached out to the fireplace installer, who came to quote, and found that because they lived in such like an old like house that had been rebuilt so many times over the years, there was no straight shot to get a chimney out of this house, and they would need to go through this like funny wiggle to like get the chimney out of the house, which was obviously expensive, but also risky. Like, how do you clean this thing if it ever gets stuck? And so Mike was really worried about this. And we looked at his solar system. We looked at what's the data from Solarbot, and we realized that he actually had spare capacity on his solar. We were fully utilizing his battery, and there was nowhere for the solar to go. And so we recommended that on a certain time of day, he turned on his underfloor heating, and that ran entirely off this extra solar that otherwise would have been wasted. He turned it off at the end of the day, and that was warm enough for his house to keep him going through the whole night. He avoided installing this 40,000 Rand fireplace just by better utilizing the system that he already had in place. Karina is another example, and I think Karina is probably more a persona of someone who's a bit intimidated by newer technologies, which I think probably is something that you'll come across. And I think one of the powerful things about Plentify and the way we designed our applications is to make it as user-friendly and intuitive as possible. And I think that really comes across with Karina's quote, who said that I felt like a technological dinosaur, but Plentify has just taken control of all my worries. I have absolutely no concerns about when the geyser is going to be hot. So that takes us through the product part of this webinar. With that, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Annelie, our Chief Operations Officer, to take us through the installer journey.
Thanks, John. Are you happy to keep sharing your screen?
I am, yeah.
Okay, excellent. Then we can go to the next slide. Our aim is really to keep the installer journey as simple as possible. I'm going to take you through how to get set up to actually install these devices and validate them through our installer app. And then I'll also take you through some of the details of the devices themselves and what's included in the various kits. If you are purchasing one of these devices, what comes with it, what do you need in practice when you're installing these in a customer's home. Great. So starting with the actually the initial step, which is to register with us so that you can use our also web-based installer application. You're going to go to our Plentify website first, and you're going to register your details with the invitation code Herholdt 2024. The reason for that is just we get installer applications all the time, and we want to know you're affiliated with Herholdt, then we can fast track your application and get you set up as quickly as possible. Then we're going to send you a confirmation email and let you know that you can access the app. I'll show you that in a second. And then you can use the app to validate installations on site. So at a user's home, record the details of their system, the details of the device, and just let us know everything's set up properly. You can run tests on Hotbot, for example, to check that everything's set up correctly. So that's the kind of thing that you want to use the installer app for. If you can go to the next slide, then I can quickly show you where you need to go. So that's plentify.io. That's our website. There is an installer's focused page. You'll see that at the top of the nav bar, or you can just type in plentify.io/installers. By registering your account there, you're going to get access to the web-based installer applications. You'll see there's buttons and contact details to get in touch with our support team. And we're going to be updating this webpage as we go. We obviously expect, as you guys are interacting with the devices and practically installing them, you're probably going to come across some questions or specific things that you want to troubleshoot, and we're going to be making sure that those frequently asked questions are updated continuously throughout this relationship, so we can learn from each other and share information that way. Great. So once you've registered your account, we're going to send you that confirmation email that I mentioned and let you know that your account has been created on the installer app. To log into the app, you're going to go to install.plentify.io. You don't have to memorize all these URLs. We're going to send that to you in the confirmation email as well. And once you've clicked on that URL, you can quickly press play. So it's a simple, very simple process. If you go to install.plentify.io, you're going to be logging in with the same email address that you've provided us with your initial application. So you enter your email address into the sign in block. And you're going to be using a PIN that we send to that email address to validate that you're the right person, and we know that you have access to this email address that you're using to log in. So that's just a little bit of two-factor authentication to make sure it's the right person getting access to this application. Great. So just a note, I'm going to show you some parts of the process when you're installing and what you're going to be entering into the installer app. But it is very important that you capture the system details. This is going to be geyser details if you are installing a hotbot, as well as solar outlay details, like how many solar panels, what type of battery, what capacity, inverter brand, all of those things. We ask you to log them so that we have a sense of how we expect the system to behave, and we can obviously run our data science models on top of that. We do also ask you to log a couple of field notes for better maintenance purposes, and is a little bit of practical context that's always useful to have, whether a geyser is outside or inside the roof. Cavity, that kind of thing is very helpful when we are troubleshooting with the customer further down the line. If there's moisture detected outside, that's not a surprise. If it's inside the drip tray, that is something that we want to investigate. Great. I think we can move on to the next slide. Great. And so this flow is just going to give you a sense of the questions we ask when you are validating an installation with a Solarbot. You can press play. These are very clear instructions: install a hotbot, install a Solarbot. So in this case, we want to click into the Solarbot. You're going to add the device ID, which is 4 digits. Also show you where to access that on the device and in the kit. And you're going to name the system. Generally, customers will name, whether it's home or a guest cottage or whatever it is, name the system that the customer is going to be using. They're also going to be naming it in their own app registrations. You're going to add details about the battery, make, model, capacity, and then solar panel details, make, model, capacity again. There is an option for you to add multiple strings, as you'll see in the video in a second as well. There you go. So you can add multiple depending on the setup that you're working with when you're with the customer. Great. We also ask you to take photos of the setup, useful for us to verify what we're working with and look at the details of the installation. You can see all of our photo albums look like that. Lots of different devices. Confirm that the customer is happy to have their details captured. This is a very important step that we stress with both installers and end users. We want to make sure we know exactly where devices are ending up, so that if a customer comes to us, we know which device is associated with their details and we can help them solve a problem as quickly as possible, as opposed to having to figure out which device did you get, from who did you get it, what was the 4-digit code, all of those things. We try and record this at the point of installation to make the process as seamless for the customer as possible in the future. Great. So we've got customer details. We need their consent to be able to capture those personal contact details. As I'm sure you've all come across popular legislation and SA, it's very important that we comply with those details. So that was just the Solarbot component of the installer app flow. There's a similar process for the hotbot. For the sake of time, we've just skipped that for the time being. But very similarly, you're going to click install a hotbot, and it's going to ask you for specific details of that geyser system. Where is it based? How does it look? Make sure you upload photos. All of those steps are outlined step by step within the installer app. Right, I think we can go to the next slide. Right, Okay, so now we're getting into the specifics of each device. You've already seen pictures of the Solarbot. This is just a slightly more detailed drawing, so you know what to look out for. It's got a status light that will light up at the end when you know you've connected it successfully. There's different buttons. I think John also already spoke to the antenna. The one is for connecting with the hotbot and communicating with that. And the other one is for connecting to the home Wi-Fi network. There's an inverter port and a pass-through port. Very importantly, for SunSync and DEA inverters, the Solarbot is using a pass-through feature that allows us to connect with the SunSync dongle, SunSync or DEA dongle on the side. Okay, I'm going to not go through every single item because I don't think that's necessary at this stage. If we go to the next slide, I can show you a little bit more practically. This is what is included in the Solarbot kit. So you've got the device, obviously, you've got your inverter cable, pass-through cable, as well as mounting screws. You've got a starter guide, which you're going to end up handing over to the user, and an installation manual. All of this is essentially everything you need to be able to put the device, mount the device, connect the device to the inverter, and as John said, plug and play from there. I'm going to show you a little bit more detail on the next page. It's an extremely simple installation, as you can see. This is our setup in the office. We've got a SunSync inverter, 2 cables connected, one to the inverter, one via the pass-through cable to the dongle, and you'll see the ports are super clearly marked on the device itself. They're little RJ connectors that you can just plug in. And you'll see on the right-hand side, that's the little device ID that we've been referencing throughout, 4 digits or letters, and that's going to be a unique identifier where you know this is the device connected to this user. The user knows this is their device. They need to input that when they register for the app. This is how we associate users and devices to each other. Great. On the next page, I just want to show you the detail, or at least give you a sense of what you can get in the kit as the installer guide. This is an extremely detailed document. Even with the Solarbot installation, which I just pointed out is extremely simple, it'll take you through how to mount the device. I don't think anyone in this room really needs instructions on how to do that, but there's detailed instructions on how to use the screws and the little wall mounting plates, plug in the Solarbot, connect the Solarbot to Wi-Fi, connect to the dongle, validate via the installer app, and ultimately hand this over to the customer. Very, very simple process. Also, we include these guides on the installer app itself and on the installer page on our website. So this is information that's really, really easy to access. We include a manual in every single kit. So we're trying to make it as easy as possible for someone to just get this off the shelf and put this in place in someone's home. Great. Now we can move on to the Hotbot component, which in comparison to the Solarbot can look a little bit more intimidating, but it's actually also super, super simple. I'm keen to just point out a couple of details. Obviously, this is a covered device. We've just taken a photo here with the lid off. Very, very clear color coding and instructions included on the device itself. You'll see there just below the battery, there's detailed instructions. Again, there's an installer manual included in the kit, as well as a starter guide for the customer. But here I just want to focus your attention on the details that you're going to need to pay attention to for the installation. So we've got sensor ports, you've got an inlet sensor, an outlet sensor. Those are going on the inlet and outlet pipes. Then you're also going to look at the thermostat sensor and wetness sensors. There's 2 little wetness sensor connectors that I'll also cover in the next slide. And then obviously electrical connections, you're connecting incoming power, removing that from the geyser, adding that to the hotbot, and then having the outgoing power connected to the geyser. So there's effectively a little bridge with the hotbot in the middle. You can ignore, for the purposes of this rollout, any plumbing related ports like the flow and the valve port. We do sometimes include a flow meter in our hotbot installations, but it's not absolutely necessary. And so just makes it easier to roll out these devices without necessarily needing any plumbing as part of the process. Great. We can move to the next slide so I can just show you the specific sensors. So as I was saying, inlet, outlet, and thermostat sensors. The first 2 have little pipe clips. You'll see there in the white perspex. They clip onto pipes and they've got little O-rings that you can attach them to the pipes with. They're very clearly color coded, so you can just plug and play into the device. Thermostat sensor is needs to go in with the thermostat. You need to remove the geyser thermostat, thread the thermostat sensor in there, and then close up the thermostat pocket again. Very important not to damage the thermostat sensor in that process. Each one of these sensors is telling the Hotbot what temperature the water is coming into the geyser, leaving the geyser, and within the geyser. And if it thinks the Hotbot is a different temperature from what it actually is, if there's any damage to the sensor, it's going to behave in unexpected ways, because it's not going to heat if it thinks it's already hot. Great. So very, very important to be careful, especially with the thermostat sensor. Moving on to the next slide, the two wetness sensors I mentioned earlier, you'll see there's one has got a little, should say an RJ connector, and the other one is a little Molex connector, so it's very easy again to spot where they go on the Hotbot device itself. These are the meter-long sensors that John was referring to earlier that are going to lie in the drip tray and are going to be very accurate, give you very accurate readings on whether there's any moisture detected throughout the drip tray. What I haven't pictured, just for the sake of not just going through 10 different illustrations. There's giant cable ties and small cable ties just to help you secure the device, as well as the various cable connectors that we've got. There's some power extension cable, especially for connecting the Hotbot to the geyser. We've got wall mounting screws and plugs, and then again, installer guide and starter guide, one being installer facing, one being customer facing, included within each kit. Go to the next slide. Great, so the Hotbot manual is similarly detailed to the Solarbot one. It has more detail on each sensor and where they go, how they work. Important that we haven't amended our standard installation manual. They still include plumbing components. You can just ignore that that bit. Again, it's going to be flow related or valve related. You can skip over that and just focus on the sensors and the wetness detectors I've covered here. And there's a little important notice already. Like I said, thermostat sensor is very important to keep the integrity of the sensor safe. If it gets damaged, it's going to affect the way that the Hotbot operates. Great. Next slide. Great. So these are the starter kits. You'll see they look slightly different for the Solarbot and the Hotbot. They're included in the individual kit boxes, and each of them includes the 4-digit code, the device ID. That's very important for you to take note of during the registration within the installer app, and for the customer to take note of when they register on the individual end user app. And so, yeah, very, very important to hand these over to the customer at the end of the installation process. Note that these codes are also on the devices. We just don't want to force someone to climb back into the roof cavity if they need to go figure out what their Hotbot ID is. So this is the way to make it as easy as possible. Slightly easier with the Solarbot. Presumably this is maybe in your garage or somewhere else that's easier to access than your geyser, but we want to, again, make this as smooth and as seamless an experience for customer as possible. Great. I think we can move on to the next. I'm going to check if Talia, can you unmute? I'm not sure if you are officially listed as a speaker, but Talia's one of our operations managers. She is very experienced in the field working with installers, and I think she's best placed to take you through the installation checklist, which is really just a little bit of a recap of what we went through, what to keep in mind once you've installed these devices on site, and what you need to make sure is done before leaving to make sure that the customer has a good experience.
Cool. Annalie or anyone else, can you hear me? Great. Okay. Yeah, so just a couple of checklist items. Obviously, there's a lot of information that you have to absorb now, so we're not going to bombard you with all of it, but just some important notes, and then the rest you can read on in the installation manuals, and on the installer page on our website as well. There's a lot of resources there. So just a couple of things for the Solarbot installation specifically. Before you leave site, just make sure that the device is securely mounted. You might not always have access to a nice flush wall. And yeah, so just make sure that's securely mounted along with the dongle. Make sure that the sensors are plugged into the correct ports. It'll save an additional call out or stress from the customer. And the most important thing, if you forget anything else, this is the most important thing, is to make sure that you connect the device, or that the user connects the device to Wi-Fi. The device exclusively communicates via Wi-Fi, so it's very important that it is connected to the Wi-Fi. You can move to the next slide. With the Hotbot, there's obviously, since it's a more involved installation, there are larger, there's a longer list of things to look out for. So just a couple things. Please keep an eye out for any DB timers or ripple relays. Disable them if you can. I know that we are not legally allowed to work on ripple relays, but there is a tag for that in the installer app. So then at least just select the ripple relay tag if there is a ripple relay installed in the house. And the purpose of disabling the DB timers is that the Hotbot itself, as John has mentioned previously, has a routines function built into it, and DB timers can interfere with the Hotbot's automations. The DB timer is just a redundancy then. Please make sure that you check whether wetness sensors should be installed. If you want to have a little bit of a laugh, there's a picture of one of our installations that we've seen where the wetness sensors were just casually draped over the geyser. Obviously, wetness sensors should not be installed outside because we cannot do reliable wetness detection when it is exposed to the elements. Please make sure that the sensors are plugged into the correct ports. For your convenience, everything is color-coded as well as labeled. Here is another beautiful picture from an installation where the outlet sensor is plugged into the wetness port. So please make sure that you check that. Do a final wiring check before you leave site. I'm sure I'm preaching to the converted here, but it's just good practice to tug on all your wires before you leave site to make sure that you've actually crimped the wires on the power terminals correctly, and that they are secure. Please make sure you set the geyser thermostat to 65 degrees. I recognize that I'm speaking to a group of installers, electricians who may not regularly work with geysers, and a thermostat has a weird dial. If you dial clockwise, it actually reduces the temperature. So we just indicated here on the image for you, the 70 degrees is actually right at the bottom, and the 10 degrees is clockwise at the top. And best practice is to reset the thermostat, so dial it all the way down and then dial it back up to 65. And the reason for that is so that the mechanical thermostat is the mechanical cutoff. And if the thermostat is not set up to 65, but hypothetically 50 degrees, and the end user wants to set their own set point on the app, and they set their set point to 60 degrees, the Hotbot will not be able to make the geyser reach 60 degrees because the thermostat is the mechanical cutoff. And then lastly, the Hotbot does have a GSM module, so it can communicate via the GSM network, but it is best practice to connect the device to Wi-Fi during the installation process. Then that is done as well. We'll go to the next slide. And I think you can click through there, John. There might be some images missing. Yes. So the installer app will call for photos to be submitted. Please make sure your photos are not blurry. This is also a drive-by Hotbot photo that we've received before. We use these photos for QA on installations. So yes, please don't submit blurry photos. And then you can click through the next one as well. John, please make sure to use the tags in the validation app, in the installer web app. The tags not only give information about the geyser system, but also feeds into the validation results. For example, there is a no drip tray tag that is selected, which means that it will, if you had installed wetness sensors, it will prompt you that you shouldn't have installed them. And if you haven't installed wetness sensors, it will ignore that validation. So that feeds into the validation results as well to give you the right tooltips. Yeah, I think that's that. Yes. Very, very important again, like with a Solarbot and connecting it to Wi-Fi. For the whole combo, it is, if you forget everything else, it is super important that the user, that you remember to remind the user to register on the app and add their hotbots and Solarbots to the app. Without the app, the hotbot and the Solarbot is just an ornament mounted in their garage or on their roof. It won't actually add any value. Yeah, so I think that's that. Yes. Annelie, do you want to run through the support?
Yes, I'll quickly run through this. So you can, as I mentioned earlier, we have a website, plentify.io/installers that we're going to be keeping updated. You can also go there. It has our contact details, but to be extra careful, I'm including it here. support@plentify.io is where you can reach the Plentify team directly. And lastly, we've got a WhatsApp group. So last but not least, this is the WhatsApp group with the Herholdts and Plentify teams on board. If you scan that QR code, you can join there if you haven't already joined, because I know there's already 80+ people on there. That's where we are keen to hear what your experiences are with the devices, and if you have any questions up front about the material from this presentation and anything else that pops up that you want to clarify before you're starting to have more conversations with customers, we are happy to help. And yep, the more you share on that group, I think the more other people can also learn from it. So very, very keen to hear what comes up there. So we're available on WhatsApp, email, and I recommend you keep an eye on this website because we will be posting updates there throughout this rollout and hopefully in the coming weeks and months. Great, I think that is it for our presentation. We can get into the Q&A section.
Annelie, would you like for me to enable everyone's mics, or would you rather answer the questions that are posted in the Q&A section?
Let's start with the questions in the Q&A section and then unmute from there. I think we have some time, so yeah, but maybe just to keep the initial discussion tidy, we can do it that way.
No problem.
Okay, great. So just taking a look through the Q&A, I think let's start at the bottom. Does this mean that with Hotbot, you are able to connect the geyser behind the inverter and that Solarbot will turn off the geyser when your loads are high? Hein, that's correct. Exactly.
Yeah,
So
I actually posted there that it's already been answered. Yeah.
okay, awesome. Cool. Thank you, Hein. Thanks for highlighting that. Cool. The next question is from One Solar. Does it work with geyser-wise timers? As Talia mentioned, if there is another timer in the house, please do disconnect that other timer. The one exception you might be wondering about is for pumped solar geysers and how you control the pump on that solar geyser. At the moment, Hotbot is only compatible with electric geysers and thermosiphon solar geysers, not with pumped solar geysers. So you can set up your geyser wires to run the pump if you want, but that's not natively supported by Hotbot. Check back in a few months, though, and we'll get that sorted for you. The next question, also from One Solar, is what is the annual subscription cost after the first year? I don't know if Careless is on the line and would like to tackle that one.
Yeah, John, before he answers, I think the main thing about it is the reason why we are including the first year's subscription is so that people can actually experience what it is, because sometimes, end users are, let's say, hesitant to pay for a subscription fee. But based on all of the case studies and all of the research that's been done, what happens is Solarbot and Hotbot actually ends up paying for itself like 7 times every month. So the idea would be that they can experience it, and if they do not want to have the added features, then what happens is the electricity price or the electricity consumption will go up by 350 Rand on the geyser alone. And I think through that, it actually shows you that the Hotbot and Solarbot basically pays for itself. So the subscription fees are really low. I don't know if Kellis wants to answer that, but ultimately the savings, it was designed this way that your savings should be paying for it, and it should be coming out of anybody's pocket.
Thanks, Johan. That's an excellent point. I assume that's Johan behind Hein's microphone there. Yeah, that's a great point. And actually, we've got empirical evidence to back that up as well. I mean, we've been selling Hotbots on subscription for many years now, and every now and then people's credit cards will expire, and sometimes they'll forget to update those cards. And the best recovery mechanism we have is to email them and say, hey, last month you saved this many hundreds of rands, and we track that for every user in real time. We're going to disable your service, and therefore your electricity cost is going to go up by X rands per month. And that generally gets them to update their credit card details immediately, because it really is a no-brainer to have this technology in the house.
See, we've got a hand up there from Inhuman.
Yeah, Neil, go for it.
I think he's Anik. If you can maybe just activate his microphone.
I've done so.
He's just unmute himself. There we go.
Thank you so much. Hey, John, are you well?
Excellent. How are you doing, Neil?
Good. Great. Listen, I like the Solarbot. I've been struggling with a lot of the SunSync customers to optimize and schedule, and it takes a lot of administration to do that manually, as well as the habits change from customers. As seasons change, as load shedding schedules change. So that's I think that will reduce the admin burden. Just on that question, with what inverters do or can the Solarbot match? Is it mostly just a DEA or SunSync, or is it like Lux Power as well? What's that range currently, or do you see it expanding? Where we're sitting with that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So at the moment, it's compatible with SunSync and DEA inverters. Next on the list is SunGrow. Solarbot itself has RS485, RS232, and CAN on board. So it's in theory compatible with every inverter. We're just going to be building those integrations over time in partnership with Herholdt, based on where we can unlock the greatest impact.
Yeah, I think the next one after SunGrow would be Victron that we are aiming to do.
Yeah, brilliant.
Okay, cool. That's yeah. So I mean, it's a burden. It's really a burden, because I mean, you get a lot of customers, they don't change their own settings, or they actually do change it without knowing what they're changing, and especially now with load shedding kind of missing in action, with the idea of maximizing solar consumption, it's still tricky, because it changes with season, it changes with guests coming in. So yeah, I think having something that automates that is going to add a lot of value to the customers, and that comes back to the installer again in terms of referral or better business. So no, I look forward to that.
Neil, I think one thing that we can tell you is it's not going to be a closed loop system that it only covers products that Herholdt mainly distributes. We want to open it up to even people that made the wrong choices. But we are looking at install capacities and requests. So I think what we should maybe do, John, is just sort of have like on the Plantify installer app, maybe like a thing about what brand of inverter do they want, like a poll. What should we focus on next? based on what their install base is, because obviously there are a lot of guys that maybe install products that we don't sell, but obviously we want to roll out these Solarbots and Hotbots to them. And if it was LuxPower, maybe that can be the one that goes next on the integration list from your side. So I think maybe if we have on the installer section itself that, have like a poll on what would they would like to see next, a type thing where they can basically vote on.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. Consider it done. Just give us a few days. And Neil, thanks for the question. I think there's another way to expand on that question as well, which is, Plentify, we're a home energy management system. One side of this marketplace is the inverter, the other side is the loads as well. So I think a natural question that arises as well is this only going to work with Plentify devices and only work with Hotbot? And the answer
I think it's one of my questions that I posted there. Are there any plans to expand to Sonoff or Akara devices?
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for the question. Absolutely. So we are building a home energy management system that is going to connect to a variety of different load control devices. Tuya is probably first, Sonoff probably second. But again, perhaps we should have a form out there to get input from the installers as to what platforms.
So just for those that don't know, Tuya means the CBI range of timers and switches. So that would be then what Tuya integrates into. So it just runs CBI, Helaman, all of those products. They all use the Tuya backend, so they will also be compatible then.
Exactly. Yeah, I think the majority of load controllers you got to take a lot these days are Tuya-based devices.
I think Neil's still got his hand up, and then Kurt.
Sorry for that. Yeah, so I mean, what we've seen now with the break in load shedding is that a lot of the fly-by-nights have fallen away. So now we've got systems installed which we typically won't install or advise customers install. So kind of a range of inverters. But I mean, the customers have already gone through buying that at their own capital cost. A very few of them have put it through kind of a leased model. And now they're sitting with what we would say in Afrikaans, die gebakte pere. So I think adding a value to those existing customers through the Herholdt's range, SunSync, etc., and then later converting, as some of these inferior products are bound to fail within the next couple of years, would be very valuable. So yeah, I think that's the only reason why I would look at installing it onto systems outside of SunSync and Daya. I think from our side as X4 Energy, we're most comfortable with that range. Gives you much more control, and I think from all of the installations that we've done, that we've had the least problems with them. It's just something to consider, I think, in just broadening the scope for the installers on the Herholdt's platform to start picking up the pieces from those that just left the industry as they went in.
Yeah, Neil, also on that point, I think one of the key things that we have is John and them promised that the Plentify app won't go down. So I think what it brings to you is, John, where are your servers hosted?
Our servers are hosted in Europe.
In Europe, okay. And is it based on Amazon or Azure?
Yeah, it's hosted on AWS.
On AWS.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So I mean, the redundancy factor on that is quite great. So I mean, running on Amazon Web Services is one of the best server hosting platforms that you can run. So what's nice about it is with the pass through, if your customer has an app situation, obviously I would advise to still keep the dongle in, because remote firmware upgrades and things happens through that. But they will always be able to monitor and see what their system is doing on Plentify. John, just one more thing. I think for future, I mean, obviously there's SIG Energy, which has a lot of these features built into it, but I think for the SIG Energy side is definitely Hotbot is a definite add-on for that, and something that you and Lucas should look into exploring to get the Hotbot specifically integrated into SIG Energy right now, because it's something that can definitely also add value to that.
That's a great point. Yeah, and I think beyond Hotbot, probably load control more broadly as well.
Yeah.
And we can do that. And I think
John.
Yeah,
sorry. John, I see. The question about the subscription keeps coming up. So maybe I can share, because Kalias, are you on the line? Because we had a discussion on that, and maybe I can just fill it in. Is that I'm sure there's going to be, in a year, there might be a little bit of an escalation. I know there's going to be longer than 12-month options at a discounted price. But as it stands at the moment, the subscription, if you had it and you had to renew it for another year, you're on $588. That's just under 50, $49.50 per month. So that's where we stand. Yeah.
Per device.
Per device, $49.50 per device.
Yeah. So in
this is where we stand now.
In essence, it's going to cost you 49 Rand to save 350 on your Hotbot, and it's going to cost you 49.50 to save an extra additional 400 to 1,000 Rand on your Solarbot side. So definitely paying for themselves.
Absolutely.
John, I think it's maybe not a bad idea to just touch on the amount of installs that you guys know that are unoptimized in the country. Like that came up in the previous discussion, but I think when we discussed this previously, I was really shocked by that numbers that you presented to us there. So maybe just touch on that, because as was mentioned,
how many unoptimized solar installs are there?
Sure, that's a great question. I would have thought that you might have the best answer. What we've seen is from our beta trials, which are, I mean, it's definitely not a representative sample of the whole country, but it is a pretty random sample. Probably 80% plus are shockingly set up.
Yeah, and to just give you an idea, last year we rolled out over 200,000 solar installations. So, I mean, if you take it at 80%, that just gives you guys an idea of what the scope is for optimization of solar systems out there, never mind new installs.
Just for reference, I'm going to unmute all the attendees just to make it easier to answer the questions. So please, everyone, just make sure that you do put your mic off once you are finished so that we don't have interference.
Okay, Kurt, you can go. Just unmute and go.
Product. I really see the value in the prepaid install market. I'm in a town where they actually allow grid tie and pushback at different time of use tariffs. So obviously your excess will go through back to the grid, depending on load and battery SOC. But can you then optimize the settings to best suit the time of use time slots from a consumption cost and a feedback tariff point of view?
You are living in the future. I love it.
We've had this for the last 12 years in Port Elizabeth, so we've always had grid feed. So that's a great way of getting that ROI to 4 years. But obviously there's still ways that you want to optimize it, because you don't want import consumption during peak times, and you want to charge from grid to battery if you have to in off peak.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean.
Absolutely. I mean, this is what Plentify is built for. It's for optimizing the time of energy use. We're doing this really effectively on a much bigger scale, for example, across entire distribution grids or within multi-family settings, where we're optimizing, shifting demand away from peak times, shifting it into solar times, etc. So those features aren't natively available in the Solarbot app yet, given that most people don't have access to time of use tariffs on a residential level, but it is very high up on our roadmap to enable that, and the underlying technology already exists. Ultimately, we see a situation, hopefully, where there's real-time pricing, And everything we're building at at Plentify is targeted towards that, to adapt to real-time price and carbon signal.
Real-time pricing is like they have in the UK, where you can literally switch, and when prices go negative, you can use it to charge your batteries.
Yeah, exactly.
Anything else good?
Yeah, sorry, one last question. Just the ability to control the settings on your SunSync app. So would that be possible via the Solarbot? Because there are sometimes automations you want to do based on time of use that I typically do. I don't want to charge batteries in peak. Even from solar, I would rather export in peak, and I would rather than consume in off peak.
Yeah, totally. Kurt, I mean, I think there's nothing natively available in the app right now, but let's work together and let's design those features with your needs in mind. I think you're a great representative of.
Yeah, I think Kurt, you can have direct access to John and them, and maybe be the alpha and beta test sites for those kinds of applications.
Yeah, because I'm currently using an automation service called PV Biz that does that for me, and that changes my settings based on my automation criteria. So if I can have that all on top of this, it'll be a plus.
Brilliant. Yeah, like I said, straightforward.
We'll be in touch, John.
Thanks, Kurt.
And Matusi's got a question.
I do. Good afternoon all.
Am
I audible?
Yes.
Oh, lovely. I actually engaged with the Plentify team sometime last year, but I think it was still early days of the Hotbot. I had an interesting use case, which unfortunately fell flat because my potential client didn't like the subscription model. But I want to ask a more technical one to see if there's been any headway made. So the particular use case was a residential complex where you'd have multiple end users. So let's say a block of flats with X number of flats, and you've got a central solar PV system. Obviously, you'd still want to maximize your PV as the Hotbot and the Solarbot would be able to do for you. But now it's difficult to control 20 end users when they switch on their geysers, when they switch them off, and things like that. Are we now able to have some sort of a hive, or let's say a mesh system where you can have multiple Hotbots?
One Solarbot with multiple Hotbots.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. Where that end users are always going to be a problem if there's multiples of them, but and they should be able to override certain things for their convenience, should they need to, but still being able to maximize the use of your solar PV.
Matusi, are you particularly talking about a Baldwin development? Because Lucas has got a lot of experience in that. Okay.
I'm not, but I'm curious now. Sounds like I'm not the only one who's had this issue.
Yeah, so the short answer is yes. So in an individual home, a Solarbot can talk to multiple Hotbots if you have multiple geysers in your home. Within a multi-family situation, the answer is also yes, and that we would install a Hotbot in every geyser within that complex, and they will wirelessly coordinate with each other and the solar system to ensure that we maximize solar self-consumption and turn off geysers during outages, etc. And we are doing that at scale with the biggest property developers in the country at the moment.
So you'd still need a Wi-Fi system to do all of that, or do we do PLC?
No, they mesh with each other.
Exactly. They mesh.
Oh, nice. Nice. Thank you. That's all from me.
Great.
We've got a few questions in the Q&A side. I think one of the questions here, and one that I actually also have, is the fact that it's how do I call a web app at the moment? What is the future looking like for native iOS and Android apps?
Yeah, it's coming soon. We're busy on some kind of architectural stuff at the moment. That is the next thing we've got to build. And then after that comes the native app development. So probably expecting about Q1, Q2 next year to release both Android and iOS apps.
Okay. Then there's I posted a question about Hotbot can be used for any heater or pool heat pump, and not just geysers. So in other words, like you mentioned, underfloor heating, it can be used for that. Can it be used to control your pumps?
It's designed for resistive loads, not inductive loads, so it can work.
So in other words, we will be using like Tuya for pool pumps.
Yeah, and I think it's probably a cheaper, more
efficient way. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Then there was a question by Christian that says, what happens if he has 3 geysers? I see it has been answered by Talia. Depends on the way that it was plumbed. If they're in series, you wouldn't need more than 1 hotbot, but if they're in parallel, it's better to install 1 per geyser. Is that correct, John?
I think that even if they're in series, there's value in installing more than 1 per hotbot. I'll give you an example. Stephen, who you know well, he's been working on Solarbot development. He installed a solar system in his house, and he wasn't saving as much as he wanted to. And that was actually when he got in touch with Plentify. He wasn't working for us at the time. And we shared a vision, and so we linked up and have been working together since. And what he did is he first installed the Solarbot, and we optimized his battery and his solar as much as possible, but he still wasn't making full utilization of his solar. We then installed a second geyser in series, and we stuck a second hotbot on there. And what we're doing now is the downstream geyser, we heat as the primary geyser, and if there's any extra solar, we heat the upstream geyser. So the inlet water to that downstream geyser is warmer and heated by solar. The result of that is that Stephen's no longer buying power from the grid. So effectively, it's been a really cheap way of increasing his storage capacity without having to buy an additional battery. So I think it really depends on the setup, and how much you need to optimize in your home will determine how many load control devices you need.
Yeah, I just want to add there that just in terms of practicality, if you have 2 geysers plumbed in parallel, then if you want, because they have 2 separate inlets, water inlets going into the 2 separate geysers, so then they're essentially, you can see them as 2 separate systems. So then you would need one device per geyser. And yes, absolutely, you have more fine control if you have a device per geyser, even if your geysers are plumbed in series. We have users who choose both ways. Stevens is a great example of a way that he could maximize his solar potential, but users who might not feel that it's necessary, or don't want to do that, or don't want that fine control, or whatever reason, it is possible to only install 1 hotbot normally on the primary feed geyser to the home. And when I say primary feed, I mean the geyser that is the first feed when you open your taps. And then because the geysers plumbed in series will all just have 1 incoming cold water inlet. So yeah, just to specify my answer, it's not a binary yes or no. It depends on the control that you want. But for parallel plumbed geysers, you do have to have 1 per geyser.
John, there was one question that I want to ask. Based on the fact that Solarbot works with resistive loads, does this mean that if there's excess 2 kilowatts worth of PV, even if you've got a 3 kilowatt element, it'll only push 2 kilowatts worth of PV there, or does it basically have a full load on off?
Great question. So at the moment, full load on off, but again, watch the space, coming soon.
Okay, so you guys have listened.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Then I think one great question from Paolo is, what does this have on people being able to access it from the outside? So in essence, hacking the device or getting in from the outside into the internal network.
Yeah, fantastic question. Particularly given the nature of the equipment we're talking about, it's critical to each homeowner, and also together this giant virtual power plant is a big asset on our grid. So we pay a lot of close attention to the security of our system, and probably the headline which speaks to it the best is that we have passed all the security compliance requirements of both Standard Bank and Sanlam. who are very conservative as big financial services players. The details underneath that are basically encryption and authentication at every level of our stack. Lots of like vulnerability scanning on all of our code pipelines. I mean, there's pages and pages and pages of security interventions that we've implemented. And beyond that as well, we've also built a highly resilient system that is quick to recover. So one of the things we do, for example, if anyone who's in tech will be familiar with disaster recovery, you basically try to figure out what's the worst thing that can happen to your system, make it happen, and then see how long it takes you to bring everything back. And we practice that every single month. Each of our engineers has a turn, and we've got it down to 2 hours. Like the worst possible thing happens in 2 hours, the system's back up and running on completely new infrastructure, entirely secure.
Okay, John, I think based on one of the questions that Kurt asked here, does Solarbot enable setting changes? So, you know, what happens when we are running through the pass-through and the customer overrides settings on the inverter? So time of use settings, charge and discharge rates and all of that. Does the Solarbot override that? Or does the dongle or screen inputs override the Solarbot?
Good question. So the pass
because the fingers that you've got people with fingers that like to press buttons on screens, and then usually that results in an installer call out.
Yeah, and that's a good point. So the quick answer is no, Solarbot rules. The longer answer is that the pass through is not a kind of a transparent data delivery mechanism. There's a whole bunch of kind of code that's in there that looks at all the requests that are coming in from the dongle and decides what to pass on to the inverter or not. And so, for example, that we can pass on firmware updates, but exclude commands to try change settings and dynamically change that depending on the application.
Okay. So in other words, even the fact that Solarbot rules, when somebody pushes a firmware update, it'll allow it.
Yeah, that's the intention. We obviously haven't been through a lot of firmware update cycles. We can't control that from our side, but we stand to improve it. Okay.
Then if the clients say they want the money not to pay service fees, are they for knowing that some front case is important? All right. Then does the Solarbot supersede the Sunsync dongle? That's been answered. We did cover the how much is it after the first year. Let me check here. Here's a question from the solar experts that's saying, how much are you investing in marketing, or are we as installers supposed to do our own marketing of the products? Yeah, John, I think maybe you can take this, and then I can also say that from our side, Herholdt is also actively marketing this product. We are doing joint marketing campaigns with Plentify, but ultimately you guys need to remember that us being a B2B business that, you know, are dependent on you guys as the boots on the ground. This is definitely something that you guys should actively be marketing. But I think I can speak for both of us saying that if you do need marketing material or anything like that, anybody at our Herholdt's marketing department or from John's team will be able to provide that kind of marketing material to you guys.
Completely agree. Yeah, I think our marketing philosophy here is twofold. It's brand marketing to let the public know that this exists through PR, through a bunch of other marketing interventions. But then really it's about empowering you as the installers with the collateral you need to sell effectively. So you'll see that on the installer page, there's sell sheets and there's tech specs and there's like why Plentify, and we'll give you collateral that you can actually pass on to the end user as part of your sales and craft copy for mailers to help you do that, etc. So expect lots of activity here to help you to sell as effectively as possible.
Okay, then we've got a question from Amp Electrical that says, do we have a solution to pull geyser power directly from the grid instead of the inverter or battery? As a client who showers at 5 a.m. when the battery SOC is at its lowest, I've overcome it by using 2 CBI timers, but is there a more elegant solution? I think Solarbot will basically make sure that battery, if we reach the minimum SOC, it will pull from the grid. Am I correct in saying that, John?
Absolutely. Yeah, you can throw away those CBI astutes.
Yeah, you can just chuck them in the bin. No need. Then there was a question, will it replace a heat pump controller? No, not at the moment, correct?
Not at the moment. We're busy working on a heat pump controller as well, but that's quite far down the path.
Okay. It says here also, is there a limit on how many hotbots can be coupled to a singular Solarbot? Talia replied that there's no limits, but currently the user app limits to 5 hotbots, but that's arbitrary, and if you see there's a need to easily increase that. I think, Talia, there's definitely a need for that, because you might have guest house, which has, let's call it 16 geysers, and they've got a solar system, and they want to make sure that these various geysers have hot water. But I think also the use case here would be that, let's say you don't have full occupancy, that maybe, if you work with the guest house or the hotel's booking, where they can say as soon as a room is booked for the weekend, then it'll switch on that hotbot. But when there's no occupation in that room, to not unnecessarily heat up that water.
Cool. I love it. It's a cool idea to add these additional sensors as well to our system to add more context. And point in that there are already applications where more than 5 hotbots would be relevant. We'll pass that back to the product team and see what we can do with it.
Okay. Are there any other questions from the audience?
There are 2 questions that are just in the chat, not in the Q&A section. I'm busy posting them to the Q&A section because it seems like some of the...
Somebody's asking, are you able to pull error messages from the SunSync inverter?
Yes.
So you are able to pull that. Okay, then the other one is, with the SunSync app going off or going offline at certain times, will that influence Solarbot?
No, Solarbot has its own communication stack, which is independent of SunSync's communication stack, and it's talking directly to the inverter over a wide RS485 connection. So there's no reliance on the dongle, the SunSync dongle at all.
All right, then somebody says, that how does Solarbot compare to SunShift?
It's a good question. I mean, I haven't looked at SunShift deeply, so I can't give you a direct comparison of the optimization impact of Plentify versus SunShift. We've obviously shown the case studies of what we can do. With SunShift, my understanding is that their value proposition is really around managing the battery state of charge. And last I checked, they weren't doing any load control on top of that. For example, turning geysers on in sequence. If that's changed, let me know. But I think that's a pretty big difference between the 2 products, if not.
Okay, I think there was one more thing that I wanted to add here, and I think this is actually something that all the installers out there should be actually looking at. I was on this weekend, I visited somebody that installed quite a big battery at a property, and the first thing people are looking at is, how do I make my battery last super long? I think we've entered the era with reduction in lithium prices and battery pricing coming down, that there's going to be a time where you are trying to extend your battery, but you are extending your ROI on your system so long that it doesn't really make sense. Where, I mean, last year when everybody installed batteries, I think batteries was like 28,000-30,000 Rand for a 5 kilowatt hour battery, and those are down at like 16,000-17,000 at the moment, which actually just shows you with the decrease, and we are seeing that it will continue downwards. So actually what the best way is to install a Solarbot and maximize on using the solar energy through the battery and cycling that battery, where we shouldn't be chasing having a battery last 20 years or having massive amounts of cycles, by minimizing our cycles in a day. And we should be shadow cycling that battery basically to make sure that the ROI is achieved a lot quicker. And then when the new battery gets added or installed in 5 years even, the previous one's already paid for and the new one comes at half the cost, which means that you can actually pay it off a lot quicker, because that parity line is really, it's breaking each other now, where batteries used to be expensive, electricity prices used to be low. Now electricity prices are going up and battery prices are going down, and that cross point, when that gets reached and the electricity price keeps going upwards, you are actually going to be paying for those batteries in 2 years, 3 years. That's going to be the ROIs if you actually use them. Because battery ROI, especially when you are getting to live electricity prices or dynamic tariffs, is going to be imperative. And I don't see anybody, even in the European countries, that are installing, the best batteries out there, using their batteries longer than 5 years, because they'll be cycling them so many times a day, making use of the energy arbitrage through the schemes that are available.
Yeah, it's a great point. I completely agree. It's incredible what's happened in battery prices the last year, and it opens up the energy transition. Like it's the time now, right? It's time to shift.
I'm saying don't save it, use it. I think, John there was a question asked. John, you mentioned that one would be able to put the geyser on essentials and that Solarbot will prevent the circuit overload. How will that work on a 5 kilowatt inverter? I think that was the same question that I had. I think, John, just to tell them that it's immediate, that it switches off the geyser.
Yeah, exactly. And the inverter, it's a thermal-based trip, so there is actually a bit of time where it can sustain a small amount of overload. And we're talking about milliseconds here between the signal from Solarbot and the hotbot turning off. It's also that signal comes over LoRa, which is a very reliable communication protocol that is very effective at traveling long ranges. So you're definitely covered within a house. For example, if you had line of sight, no obstructions, you'll easily get like 5 kilometers of range out of this thing.
Yeah, I think, Victor, just to answer you, so if you've got the geyser on and you basically at, let's call it at 3.5 kilowatts worth of load, and somebody switches on a kettle and a microwave, what will happen is as soon as the inverter hits the 5 kilowatt mark, it'll turn the geyser off immediately through the hotbot. So I think, Victor, if that answers your question. I think we'll take like one last question here. I think Kurt says, yes, something changes its API field settings, and we've had issues with automation application changes. Will this affect Solarbot?
Yeah, it's a problem with APIs when they are controlled by an unreliable party, and that's one of the advantages of being able to read directly.
Connect to the inverter directly.
Yeah, obviously the inverter registers can change, but we engage with SunSync, for example, and they guarantee us that they're never going to change those inverter registers. We also have the ability to control firmware updates to the inverter, so we can do smart things like allow it to go through to our SunSync inverter in our office, see what happens, and then roll it out elsewhere.
Okay. All right. I think if there's no more other questions, John, I'd like to thank you for doing this presentation. It's really great. Annelie has got something that she wants to say. But thank you, John, Annelie, Talia, the entire Plentify team. We're really looking forward to roll out this product to everybody.